Here's the story of 2020, a year for us to finally live in sync. So many things that need our understanding. It's time for us to think. It's the story of fellow humans who were busy with lives of their own, but they thought of bringing us together, and we can watch from home. We can all make this world much better. It's about what we're willing to confront. So sit back and enjoy the conversation of these rainbow warriors called the Queer Bunch.
The Queer Bunch, the Queer Bunch. It's a great day to watch the Queer Bunch.
Antoine, what are you doing with the mask on? Take that thing off.
Hey, safety is something we can all stand behind. But sure, I'll take it off.
That's
Hey, I don't want to catch anything from you guys on the screens.
exactly, because that's how it's transferred.
That's how it works.
Anyway,
Hey,
I
I'm
couldn't
discovering
ex-
something new every day. Apparently yesterday
Yeah,
they
really.
discovered that animals are getting it, so I want to be
No,
Yeah.
that's you protecting Cowboy then.
All right.
Anyway, well, welcome back to the 4th episode of the Queer Bunch. I am your host, Kero Saleib, and today we are talking about a topic that I think is extremely important. I mean, that's what this show is always about. We are talking about important topics all the time. Now, we are going to talk about a community that is very often further marginalized within our 2S LGBTQ plus community. It's a sad truth. However, the time is now to talk about transgender awareness. We have two incredible guests with us today, but what makes today's conversation extra special, as you already know, one of our co-hosts is a proud trans Latina. So we'll start by checking in with her. Viviana, you beautiful human, how are you feeling about today's episode and topic?
I feel great. I think it's about time that we have, the space and the opportunity to talk about these certain issues that are affecting us and have been affecting for so long. So thank you. I really want to thank you, because this is not just about us who are really transitioning. It's about the new generation who is transitioning, and that's the one who's supposed to be empowering and protecting. So I feel amazed that we have this chance. So I feel wonderful. I can't wait to hear the host. So yeah. Excellent, thank you.
Great. Viviana, I've always admired you, and being around you has always empowered me myself, and it reminds me to even be a proud non-binary person, so thank you for this. Speaking of non-binary, Ticha, how have you been doing?
COVID. I can't wait to stop hearing that man's voice after next week, so let's just say.
And we all know who she's talking about.
So yes, I'm really looking forward to. I'm going over to my friend's Joey's to watch the election, and so it's been. I'm a news junkie, and
You're having an elections party.
yeah, I hope so. And so I've been very, very up on watching what's going on, and nervous, excited, but hopeful.
Very cool.
That's wonderful. That's don't blame you for that, Ticha. I don't blame you at all. You are a mighty human, and it's always nice to see you on here with us. Now, next is Alphonso, my queen. How about you? Talk to me, mama.
I am good. I've just been very, very busy trying to organize the PinkPlayMags Awards. We are doing them this year online, so
Nice.
Gathering up everyone's videos and presenters and all that stuff has been a chore, but it's coming along, and the B girls are going to be co-hosting with Jade Electra this year.
Oh, cool.
That's amazing.
So I'm excited about that, and of course also being the American citizen on the panel, I am watching the election with bated breath as well.
Again, I'm not going to be watching the elections because it's going to give me anxiety. I already have anxiety from it. I'm just going to sacrifice a lamb or something. But I can't wait.
I thought you went vegan. Leave the lambs alone.
Touche. I can't wait to hear what you have to say today, Alfonso, especially when it comes to the trans community in the U.S. and what your experience has been here compared to here in Canada. But that being said, finally, we have my co-producer, Antoine. Now that I'm no longer on Facebook, I actually somewhat care about how you're feeling today. How are you doing, Antoine?
Don't start me. We are all so happy that you're no longer on Facebook. Let's just say.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad.
Kidding. I'm good. I'm good. Actually, I'm very excited about this episode. Last week, as you all know, it was International Pronouns Day. So I think it's fitting that we continue the education with this episode. I actually read this on. I'm not gonna mention the community member because a lot of you know him, but because I didn't get his authorization to read it. But I really like what he wrote. The kindest thing that you can do to someone is call them by their preferred pronouns. Intentionally not using a person's preferred pronoun can cause depression to queer, trans, and non-binary folks. If you mess up their pronouns, acknowledge, correct your mistake, and move on. It's extremely important that you make every intention to get that right. And I really like that statement. So let's see where this episode takes us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Antoine, for that. That's beautiful, actually, and it's so true. And for the viewers today, I just want to let you know when I got sassy with Antoine like that, he is my much, much, much older brother, and I love him dearly. And that's why I'm being sassy with him. And just a sign that we love each other. So please.
I'm having my lawyers look at your co-producer contract tomorrow.
Anyway, today we're going to talk about things like what is trans awareness? Do non-binary people fit under the transgender umbrella? How do I know which pronouns? Why can't trans people just accept their bodies for what they are? Why would someone transition and still identify as non-binary? These are questions that many of us have gone through, and I'm hearing it very often still today. We have the answers for you today, and for this we have two very special guests. Our first guest that I would love to introduce is Yasmeen Persad, and she is the Trans Program Coordinator for TPOC, which stands for Trans People of Color Project at the 519 Church Street. She's also the Research Coordinator for TWIRI, the Trans Women's HIV Research Initiative at Women's College Hospital. She has worked over the past 15 years with trans intersectional communities and service providers to create, reduce, and allow access for trans folks to social services across the province. Recently, she was part of the research group for people who identify as trans and non-binary, and this is how I actually had the chance to meet Yasmeen. So Yasmeen, we're very happy to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
That's good. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say today, and thank you again for being here. Our second guest is Boyd Kodak. He has worked, so viewers, his biography is 50 pages long, so I had to reduce it to a paragraph. So everything that I'm going to say is only like nothing compared to what he's accomplished, but I think are important points. He has worked for awareness, understanding, and human rights for all, and he's truly a pioneer amongst us. His efforts have had a tremendous impact and has been called a trailblazer. He has led by example, regardless of fear of persecution. I'm not going to read everything he's accomplished once again because it would be here forever and it would need another episode. But Boyd, one thing incredible about Boyd, he filed an Ontario human rights claim in 2013 regarding trans discrimination that resulted in a historical settlement with the Ministry of Correction and Toronto Police in May-June of 2016 that made world headlines. The remedy requires these organizations to work in conjunction with the Ontario Human Rights Commission and the trans community in establishing new procedures, guidelines, and training. He's also a singer and filmmaker and entertainer. He is also the chair of the Trans Alliance and is also founding steering committee for it. He is currently still writing and singing and entertaining and is about to finish writing his first musical. Boyd, do you sleep?
No, not much. Yeah, that was a. Could you get that ready for me? That's
Actually, you know what, guys, and Boyd, just something that's general impact of Boyd on the whole community is you would likely still be getting fired from your job for being LGBTQ if it wasn't for Boyd. That's for all of us, gay, lesbian, trans people in our community. That's the person that made it, not so.
Thank you.
you for that.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
what Antoine's referring to in 1988, believe it or not, all the way back then, I was in a company that was extremely discriminatory, and I filed the first complaint that actually won a precedent for LGBTQ human rights in employment that, as Antoine said, precludes that anybody be fired on that basis. And it was actually the first LGBTQ human rights case that was ever filed and passed. So,
Thank
That's
you.
awesome. Thank you so
that's
much,
pretty
Boyd.
exciting. Thank you.
One thing
You're
about
welcome.
one thing about Boyd, he does come across as shy and quiet, but you are strong, and tiny, strong and mighty. Yasmeen, you are also a powerhouse, and our very own Viviana. I have seen you work and have worked alongside you, and you are heard loud and clear, and you make sure of it. And this is a confidence that I love about you. Now, all of you here are so inspiring, and I can't wait to have this conversation with all of you. To our viewers at home watching today, listen carefully to what is being said. The number of murdered trans women and trans people around the world is on the rise, and that needs to stop. That needs to have stopped yesterday by starting it with our own home. The conversation needs to start in our own home. We need to do better. So stay tuned for more after these commercials.
I'm making sanitizer sensual.
I can have sex with my own husband.
What? I'm doing a nightly review for the Gardner Construction Boys.
I am flattening that curve, honey. Ugh, tighter. Oh, tighter. Ugh.
Hello?
Namaste, Raju.
Hey, yeah, just getting ready for our date.
Me too. Are you excited for tonight?
Yeah. Do you know what undetectable means?
Yeah. It means you're positive, and there's no way I can get HIV when we have sex. Times have changed, eh?
Yeah, times have changed. I'm positive and undetectable.
Thanks for letting me know.
Welcome back, folks. Yasmeen, Boyd, Viviana. Let's dive right in and get this conversation going. Ticha, go for it.
Well, I actually gave up my question to somebody, a friend on that posted something on Facebook, and her name is Amy Fox, and she is a community activist and filmmaker who loves collective living and came out as a butchy trans woman during the Bush years, and she lives on Coast Salish land, and we're going to be playing a video question from her, but I will read you the post that inspired me to give up my question to her. So this was her post. Identifying as female-ish, being trans, and presenting as androgynous, I usually don't dress like my user photo, and a lot of people tell me I remind them of Ellen. My experience is going from being perceived as a gender variant guy to being perceived as a trans guy to being perceived as an androgynous woman. When I try on traditional female clothing, I've been perceived as a cis woman, a trans woman, a male cross-dresser, and as a tomboy who didn't know how to wear a dress. From all this, I have found that being perceived as anything other than a masculine cis dude is basically an excuse for people to use gender to treat you like crap, but in different ways. I'm still picking this apart, but I've found it's a lot more complicated than I expected, and think at times I encounter less of what we usually call misogyny when being perceived as a woman than as a man who is breaking the rules of gender. I think this is a part of because we have defined this term with a narrow view of gender. I spend most of my time being perceived as a butch woman and am surprised that people seem to view me as a more intelligent and technically capable than when they perceive me as a gender variant cis-sexed man, which I think has something to do with how we equate masculinity and mechanical intelligence. In trade-style environments, men expect less of me than they do of a macho dude, but they are often more willing to share their professional and personal experience and perceive me as a reliable, if not always capable. Contrast being perceived as a feminine cis dude, where guys are like, what the F are you even doing here? Outside of gay spaces or perhaps Halloween, I have found that being perceived as a guy in a dress or a visible trans woman, which many onlookers consider to be the same, begets instant levels of dangerous hostility that exceeds the threats from any other mode. I can relate to some of this as well, even just trying to go to public bathrooms or, you know, I think we all know what this means. So I think we are now going to play the video.
Amy Fox asking you a question from Vancouver, BC, as follows. What in your transition surprised you about our world of gender and social control? What might cis people not expect?
So any of you could go ahead first.
Can you read the question again?
Yes. What in your transition surprised you about our world of gender and social control, and what might cis people not expect?
Well, I would say that nothing really surprised me because I expected, you know, basically all the exact same treatment as you already mentioned to happen. It's a really long process. I mean, anybody who's going to transition in any way, shape, or form, whether it be non-binary or all the way to transsexual, you're going to have to expect it. The world's getting better. We're learning. We're teaching on a regular basis, and things are way better now than they were in 1990. But I still think you have to expect it. It's just going to happen. That's my take, anyway.
Sad, but true.
Yeah.
That's the reality. Is we usually ready to face the world basically when that happens.
Yeah. How about you, Yasmeen? What do you think?
For me, I think it's quite different because being a racialized trans woman and my experience of not knowing what trans misogyny is, but kind of working through that because, you know, I never know how to sort of navigate people in the system. But what was really much more interesting is the flip side of racism that I experienced as a woman. Wow. And how I was treated so much differently because of my intersective identities. So as an immigrant and as a brown, you know, woman, as, you know, people would see if they're not knowing I'm trans, how that experience was quite different, quote unquote, with transitioning. And that was very surprising to me. And the way how I was viewed would be of so much less value and quite uneducated in many ways. So all these really, really interesting things that came about through transition was quite alarming, but it is an experience, and it still is an experience on a day-to-day basis, depending on where you are and where you go.
Thanks for that, Yasmeen, and to both of you, Borja, for that answer. I mean, it's really thought-provoking, and it's very interesting. From my experience as a non-binary person, when I tell people I'm non-binary, it's like, well, you don't look non-binary, you're masculine. I'm like, no, trust me, I'm not. Put a wig on me, and I'm. It's not the same, but yeah, it's. I mean, my experience compared to yours is it's little. Viviana, how about you?
Yeah, I'd love to hear from Viviana.
Oh, wow. You know, I have I guess I kind of relate to what Yasmeen talked when she refers to a person of color, being an immigrant and being a person who came here from somewhere else. But if I can comment on the topic that, you know, we're talking about, specifically about the question, to me, first of all, I didn't know what a trans was, and I didn't know what a trans supposed to be. And then when I found out I was supposed to be a trans woman, then I had to be like a woman. You know, something I can actually say it is that we need to learn that things are changing, but we also need to be changing with those things, and we need to be kind of embracing everything and then learning about the process. We also need to be very mindful about society. Society has been having a very hard time learning about the trans process. And now, I'm sorry to say this, but now we have so many labels. Right now, we have so many identities that society is barely catching up with all these things, and they don't know. So we need to give also a break in order for them to understand our situation, you know? This is to have a mutual understanding. We cannot be kind of, you know, asking for something without giving them a reason why, you know? We don't suppose to, but it's a way of, you know, empowering each other to have a neutral standard. So that will be kind of my comment on this, because it depends on person to person and transition to transition and how people perceive things. So I don't want to talk about specific about something that I can't talk for all the trans folks there. I can just talk about how I have seen things in my transition. So yeah.
I have a quick comment too about that is I'm a gender nonconforming and my pronouns are they and them, but I belong to women's committees and to the value of how you're perceived. So I consider myself, my lived experience is as a woman. I grew up perceived and I still am perceived. I'm also often perceived as a man too, sometimes when I'm trying to go to the bathroom and I can't find a gender neutral bathroom. So perception is really interesting. And then when people realize, or you speak, you say something and they're, you know, like saying, well, I have to go to a bathroom, and they hear your voice, now their perception changes and their attitude changes. You know, so it's really interesting how an aggression can switch over to embarrassment. Sometimes.
That's, wow, that was powerful, Ticha. Thank you so much. Already like that topic for me, I get very emotional because anyway, so we'll keep going before I start like crying on the screen, but it's Alphonso, go ahead, ask your question.
Okay, well, let's see. I have a different kind of lived experience with transsexuals. Coming from the state of Florida in the United States, and my coming out into the gay scene and everything in the 80s, transsexuals and drag queens were intermixed. And of course, you know, some of the terminology that we used back then is not favored today. But I guess my question is that with all of the different messages, I know as a Black gay man coming out, a lot of times, a lot of other gay men are not on the same page of where I am on what I'm thinking of politically or our rights or any of those things. So my question would probably be, do you feel that there is a uniformed message, or do you think that there is several messages, and is everyone on the same page?
The trans community, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
No.
I knew that's coming up.
I knew that too, but I wanted to present the question because of, you know, even down to something as simple as, you know, the word tranny. Some people who are, like I have transsexual friends who are not bothered by the word. They don't care. That's been part of their lingo. Oh yeah, it's very old school, and in a dressing room with drag queens, and that's just a regular thing. So, you know, and that's what I grew up on. So it was an adjustment. So I have to watch other people along with myself adjust with what's changed. So I sort of kind of presented the question, even though I knew what the answer was going to be.
It's a good question, actually. I'd like to hear the answer.
Yeah. Should I continue?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say yes and no. I think yes, we all have the same general message. We want to be accepted. We want to be understood. But I think that no, in the fact that we're not united as a community. We used to be much more united, believe it or not, in the 90s, late 90s and early 2000s, when we had no services, when there was no 519 services, there was no trans, male trans, there was nothing. Everything in Toronto was lesbian and gay. In fact, interestingly, I was working then for a lesbian and gay news broadcast show, and when I came out as trans, they told me I was no longer welcome because trans wasn't a part of our community. It was only lesbian and gay, and that was in 96, 97. Wow. So, yeah. So, but yeah, we, as I said, it would be really nice if we were more united, I think. But, I mean, as you've, again, already mentioned, you know, trans back in the 90s was transsexual and transgendered, meaning cross-dressers, trannies, as you said. But now the definition is so much bigger that, of course, we're all going to have different opinions now, and there's not going to be, the same sort of cohesiveness with, knowing 12 people than there is knowing 2,000 people.
Fair enough, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Boyd. Yasmeen.
Well, I think there are pockets of folks who are connected and who share some of the same connections. Of course, the trans community and non-binary is very different. And the way I talk to people and people talk to me about themselves is we go by folks self-identify, right? So go from self-identification rather than, we would say historically, these identities were put on you. So if you started to transition from male to female, automatically you became, quote unquote, outdated language as a transsexual woman or a transgender woman. Now we know that things are very much different. But I think where there is division and where there is the community is not as much gelled together, it's not we ourselves, it's how the system is set up. And the way the system is set up is for many of us kind of live in silos and in social isolation. And not because we want to, but the way things are. So prior to me having this program, there was nowhere for trans people of color of all ages, intergenerational, to go and access a space.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when we think of like the historical context of that, like mind you, there were spaces for younger folks, but there isn't any of this type of program or project for this. So it took so long for something, I've been advocating for forever to come to light in the last 3 years and got, refunded again for another 3 years. So these are the things where we have to look at the systemic spaces and how things are designed or have been designed. I really look at that, why we're not together. Sometimes, so it's not necessarily because we don't want to be together, it's because of these barriers and challenges that we encounter that push us back into, not in a closet, but into social isolation or just into living in silos or into the struggle is real. Like I have to do this and I'm on my own. There's no support. And I'm just going to do this the best way I know how. And that's where it's something that needs to be addressed. And it's on a continuum and we need to talk about this more.
Thank you. That's real talk right there. That's true.
Yeah,
that's so true.
Especially in these times, it's even more challenging.
Can I?
Go for it, Alphonso.
Add something to it. Okay, so the interesting thing for me watching the evolution of trans being like included and stuff in Florida, where I was from, if you were a drag queen, they mainly tried to push you into becoming a transsexual to do better in pageants and competitions, because that's in the South. In the US, that's a huge thing. And because I would not go that route as a drag queen, I got shunned, which is weird. So I moved to New York City and then I got into the ballroom scene and transsexuals were celebrated. And these were Black and Latino transsexuals and these communities that came together and they rallied together in the ballroom scene. So I saw different support systems for different transsexuals in different ways. So it's interesting to come to Canada and see
different way.
It's a little different in the level of support and whatever. And, and again, the segregation of the Black and Latino community here, the ballroom scene is its own thing by itself. It's now all sort of kind of coming together. But it's, we all really need to recognize each other and support each other on this.
Amen.
Well said, Alphonso. Viviana.
Yeah, I think the first thing with this question specifically, we need to recognize that most of the time and not often, if not always, the trans community or the T is always left behind. When we are part of the LGBTQI community now, we are not actually part of it. People don't see us part of it, and they don't want to acknowledge. And then we need to be real about this. And I'm sorry for this, but it's majority of the gay people. It's that they're pushing us away, and they are taking advantage of us pretty much. And I'm saying us because what's supposed to be for everybody, most of the people, they just take it when they already had enough. So I don't want to say it's a fight among us. It's just I want to say like this: we don't understand our situations, I guess. But I don't think we're divided. I think we just need to kind of refresh ourselves, refresh our mind, and say, who we are, that we all have been going through the same, and we all need to come to, this process of talking about this issue and recognizing that there is something going on with our community, and we need to fix this because the community has been, kind of separating. And as Yasmeen says, the trans community or the trans population is trying to go on the side because it's trying to avoid all this that we already went through this already. We're still going through this. I mean, they are killing us every single goddamn day. I'm sorry for the word, but it's a fact. And you don't see that happening in the gay community. And what do they say? They're easily to judge on people, but not to say something about it. And I'm not talking about every single one, but I'm talking about specific groups of individuals who just like to attack us. And on Alphonso comment, I have experienced the other way around, but I guess it's just the diversity among our community, right? About who accept what and who push doing what to what. So it's not about division, it's more about everybody has their own mind, and everybody's just trying to be safe, pretty much in their own way. I guess we're just all trying to live another day.
Yeah.
I think that this also leads to a bigger question of people being at the table. So what I've also watched as a gay man, I've watched people of color being pushed aside as well. So it's not just transsexuals, it's, lesbians and people of color have all been pushed aside. And unfortunately, it is a white gay man's world. And they are the ones who have been controlling what is going on, what the narrative has been. So
and making the decisions.
Yeah, and making all of the decisions, and that has to change. And I think more and more.
Not anymore. We're taking our places rightfully. Yeah.
I think that this year has shown that everyone needs a spot at the table, and we can no longer go backwards. We can't go back. We have to start including everyone and worry about if it happens here, it's going to happen over there. And so we need to address it right here, right now. So
I must have been blindfolded or not blindfolded. I must because I don't see how can not any of us be at the table. It is our table and we all should be at the table. But I guess more and more I understand that cisgendered white men in our community has always hijacked the narrative.
It's because they've been giving the upper hand for so long that control and manipulation of the community is still undermined, that including others makes them feel that they're no longer part of something. And that's the problem. They need to realize that this is not the way of doing things. And we're still seeing it today. We're seeing most executive directors in a lot of not-for-profit organizations are white, and they're end up being the end-all be-all for decision-making for people of color, for trans folks and trans folks of color. It needs to stop. It really, I'm getting...
I also think it has a lot to do with shaming, right? And for so many years, people of color and LGBT people of color and indigenous people have experienced that form of where spaces and where they were shaming you for who you are in that sense. So people felt for so long this sense of, I can't be at the table even if I want to get at the table. Where is the table? All these, what ifs, what, when, how. And that's also been, so when we talk about this, we always have to remember the historical context of it and how and why, where we are today and the reasons behind it. This didn't just happen overnight. This has been a period of racism. It's been a period of exclusion for trans women. It's been death for trans women of color. It's been, high rates of HIV. It's been marginalization. And where's the marginalization been coming from? We haven't done it, We haven't even had access to it. How could we, marginalize our own selves, literally? So when we have to recognize what Indigenous Two-Spirit trans women have been experiencing for the longest time. And the violence.
Yeah, and we talked about that on our last episode, Indigenous. And what was interesting is when we asked them, how is it that we could support you? They said, we already have everything in place. Don't reinvent the wheel. And I think it's very similar with the trans community that have been fighting for so long. Yeah. Everything is there. The activism work is there. The conversations are there. People
just
need
allow
to
people
stop.
their place at the table. That's all.
We know what we want. We don't need people to tell us. Viviana and I know exactly what we want and what we want our community to look like and be like.
Yeah.
It's just to give us that space to have it is the question.
Yeah.
And how can we expect the cis hetero world when we can't even come to terms within our own community? So, and I think we need to build coalitions within our community because we all have our spaces that we need. The trans community needs their space to be together. The Black community needs their space, all these different groups, but we need to remember to find ways
together. I think it's a beautiful picture. I just don't get why it's not, the picture that everybody's striving for, including cis white men. We all should be striving for a place where we all have, like you said, actually, I like that. We all need our own tribe to kind of, be part of, but also what's wrong with all the tribes coming together to work on a world where we're all included.
Well, they're holding on to their cis-colonial ways, right? Their white cis-colonial ways. So that's probably the answer to it. And not probably, that is the answer.
They don't want to lose the power. They don't want to lose.
They don't want to lose the power and the privilege.
Alphonso, you're going to say something?
Well, and I think I said it in one of our meetings, but not on air, that my suggestion about pride, that's where we need to start, is bringing everyone to the table.
Creating a coalition through that.
Right. That way everyone is represented because of the resentment the resentment and everything that goes on in the community and all of that stuff is stemmed out of pride.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm glad you brought that up too.
Thank you. Cool. Thank you for that. We're gonna move on because there's a lot to talk about.
I'm the producer, so I have to keep pointing to the clock.
No worries. And what Alphonso said, it makes me realize, and it's important that language is everything. And that comes across, and we saw it in Alfonso's question here. And it's important because we need to also understand, for instance, the term transsexual and transgender, they fall under the same umbrella. And those are two terms that are used very separately very often as well. So it's important to recognize that something as simple as that language. And with that being said, I'm going to go further back to basics of some of the questions that I mentioned earlier in the episode, because the questions people ask, I know the answers, but I want to hear the answers from you. And they are very critical questions for Trans 101, I think. And so here, are you guys ready for my big questions? All right, so there's several of them, but they're all connected, so be ready. Now, this is one that I hear often, and I'm gonna ask it, why do trans people feel the need to transition and not just be happy with their body? That's one question. And once they transition, why would someone transition and then suddenly identify as non-binary? Where does that come from? And how could you explain that to people when they ask those questions?
Oh, who wants to go?
I mean, I could go. I don't want to take up too much space.
Go
for it.
Transition for folks is actually feeling in line with what you're feeling. So there are many parts of transition too, right? So there's physical transition, there's emotional, there's, medical transition. And these things people do to be in line with exactly how they feel and how they want to see themselves. Now, we know that people might not have access to physical or medical transition depending on where they live and access to care. So to them, they might have to say, well, I am a trans woman, but I look quote unquote male. And that brings conflict to people, but they don't understand the underlying issues that, people experience on a day-to-day basis for transition. So I think it's pretty much being in line with how you feel.
Thank you.
And for that, that's again individual. I think
that's as good reason as any, as your reason is, and people should respect it and not ask the damn question.
Yeah, exactly.
And trans is an umbrella, so it's an umbrella term that could fall under many identities. And if someone transitions to whatever identity and then they decide to come out as non-binary, that's not a crime. That's their own personal decision to self-determination. And we should respect that and not be judgmental. And that's also something that within the community is very also conflicting among ourselves. Like Kero keeps alluding to the point of their non-binary identity and how that makes people feel uncomfortable. So we need to think quite broad when we think of gender and the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Yasmeen. Boyd.
Well, again, it is an individual decision as far as to how far you want to go. But again, I think a lot of it is mandated by the times. Again, when I came out in the early 90s, there wasn't a great, hardly any non-binary presence. You as I said, you were either a transsexual, the person that wanted to change their body or take hormones, or you were a transgender person who dressed. I was actually looking at a video from back then, and it very clearly stated those terms. And so it was more, back then, it was more of kind of an expected thing. Oh, so if you're transsexual, then you're going to have surgery, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. Whereas nowadays, the definitions are so broad, everybody's entitled to do what they want and how they feel. If they don't feel that they want to go have all the surgery they want, or any of the surgery, they don't have to. So, and again, a lot of that's just come from a lot of the education and awareness that we've been trying to put out there for many, many years, that, and even amongst ourselves and amongst the LGBT community and amongst the trans community, that we don't all have to be the same, or necessarily go through the same processes to determine what trans means to us individually.
That makes sense, and that leads me into the question of, when we talk about non-binary, the pronouns. There's so many pronouns right now. How do you what would be your suggestion for someone who is confused with all those pronouns because of misidentifying someone, their pronouns, and so on? A lot of people, when they make a mistake on someone's pronouns, the other person will get angry and aggravated and so on, especially if it's done on purpose over and over and over. But what are some advice that you would give to our viewers on understanding the pronouns as they come along to them, so they're not so confused?
Well, I can't really see how they're all that confusing to people. If you really, really think about it and get your head around it, we've got she, him, them, or they. Okay? So we got what? So that's not that many pronouns to really get your head around and say, okay, just call somebody by what they want to be called. Ask them. Always ask.
Yeah.
The best thing to do is ask. Don't assume. I'm definitely more comfortable with somebody asking me, just come right out. Ask me what you want. Yeah. Don't play games, don't assume, and that's the worst thing to do, is assume and hedge around. Now, if somebody's calling you, they're misgendering you on purpose, that's a whole different story. When you're saying, what if they keep repeating themselves? Well,
thanks, Boyd. Yeah. Thank you, Yasmeen. What do you think? What's your advice?
Well, I think there's more pronouns than the four that just mentioned, right? Like there's Z, there's her, there's there, there's many more pronouns that people use. I think it's easier than people think, or it's much more complicated. I go to the default of they, them, and then I ask in a respectful way. We also have to recognize that pronouns, and these pronouns that are being used, are very English, colonialistic ways. Like pronouns in other cultures have been expanded beyond. So like in certain cultures, there are no pronouns. In French pronouns, they would give a pronoun to a table. In I believe in Finnish language, again, there's no pronoun. In Filipino, he and she is used interchangeably. So we still have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to pronouns and how we relate to folks here. So I think, again, asking people respectively and talking about it. I just want to allude to one thing and talking about transition and why people transition, and just to touch on the Ontario Human Rights Code and just to recognize why they have all these different protective grounds, which we shouldn't have to under gender expression, how someone dressed, you can't discriminate against them. It's sad, but we have to have it. And just like pronouns are also protected under the Human Rights Code.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you so much, both of you, for this advice. I'm going to get the questions moving along because of time, because there's so much to talk about. Antoine, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Let's look at this topic, but we gotta roll with the time because we're heading into an hour and 15-minute episode. So I want to ask about the entertainment section of our, or a part of our community, and this probably more for Boyd and Viviana. Viviana, you're an entertainer. Boyd, you have interviewed for theBUZZ and for On the Couch an unprecedented amount of performers and artists from the trans community. What is like to be trans in the entertainment and trans and performance industry in our own community?
In our own community, or
in our own community and generally? Okay.
In general. Well, quite honestly, again, since I would say probably the 2000s, early 2000s, trans in the arts, or trans artists, in my world anyway, I'm not sure what anybody else is, have been considered very acceptable. I've also had a tremendous amount of work. I've done a tremendous amount of work with film festivals. I was the first trans programmer ever to be on a queer film festival slate, and I curated trans programs for festivals all over the world for 5 years. So so it's actually become quite a niche to be a trans artist. And when we had Trans Night at the Inside Out, I mean, the place would be packed, jammed full of people. Okay. Yeah. So
there's an acceptance within our community.
Yeah, whether it be their curiosity or what, I don't know, whatever, but there does seem, as you said, from my perspective, there's definitely been
and in the general community, in the world, how are trans artists being treated, I guess?
Well, I think that's, as I say, I think trans artists, I mean, when I say worldwide, I mean, I've kept programs for, England, all kinds of countries, all over the world. And as I said, being a trans artist is quite a niche, a quite exciting niche. And in fact, to the point where there's a lot of people now, unfortunately, that because we're getting funding now, so special funding is set aside for trans artists. And there are some people that are crossing that line because funding is, as I said, it's so.
Viviana.
Well,
what's your experience like?
Yeah, my own experience, I guess, as the short girl, because I can call myself now a drag queen because for some reason I'm not allowed no more because the gay community has already taken over that. And then when we decide to use that, it's like, you're not that because you're already transsexual. You already have tits, you already had a hip, you already have ass. You can't be called like that. And it's like, excuse me? I mean, it's not about how do I look or my body. It's about just a way of doing a job, being a entertainer. So now most of the trans had to become yourself short girls because we can use the trans, the drag queen, name. And this is something that I guess we had to thank this Mom Rue, that she's doing all of this with the trans community, putting them on the side, but she's very, quick enough to say, oh, I support the LGBTQ community when there's no trans. And then when people transition on the show, on their transition of the show, she's very quick to move them out of the system. And it's just about where I have been around and the people that I have seen. I have not gone through that extreme yet. but on the other side, because I have something that I would like to say. It was something that happened to me. I was doing an audition here for a trans that's supposed to be being a trans of color, and I was doing what they asked me to, and they actually were like, you know what, you look good, but when you talk, your voice, it might not be good for that. And I was like, I thought you were looking for a trans person, but is the thing that people get this conception now, because when there are roles and movies and things, there are not trans folks who actually do those roles. It's other people doing those roles. So people thinking that they're not actually shading what a trans person actually is. So there's a misunderstanding on that. So I think it's moving, but it's not moving the right way, or not in the right direction.
Can I just to comment on that? If you came back to the 1990s with me, you would see that every single piece of film, movies, shorts that were made by us were made by non-trans people about trans people. Our work that was made by trans people was not shown at festivals until we protested severely. And in 1998, I guess 1997, 1998, they started actually showing films made by trans people. And again, just to follow up on what she's saying, it's totally true.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Viviana. I mean, just the acceptance thing. Yeah, but honestly, Showgirls is a much cuter name than Drag Race. The hell with them.
and I want to add, like, Viviana has had the chance to perform twice at a couple of my events that I host, Middle Eastern nights and oh my God, that's Noches de Sol, and she knows how to set the floor on fire.
I haven't seen. Honestly, I haven't seen you perform. We have you on the show, but I've never seen you perform.
Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Like on fire. So I just wanted to add that before we move on, and I'm going to save the best for last. Viviana, our co-host, what is your question? Do you have a question for our host? Comments? What do you want to say?
You know, I don't have a question, and I didn't want to have a question. I don't want to use this time or waste this opportunity to be asking us questions because we all need to learn to do something is respect and understand. So we're supposed to be using this time to empower people, to encourage people to feel free and to be happy. So my comment, and this is something I want to help from the people we invite today to the show. It's a message to the people who are transitioning. It's for the new people who are start thinking about the transition and they're afraid of what's going to happen. They're seeing all these people being killed, being murdered, and they don't know if they're going to be one of them. They're seeing that there are so many people who they have to do sex for because that's the only way of surviving. And they don't know what's coming. So I just want to use this time to send them a message and to tell them that they're not alone. And I want Yasmeen and I want you, Kodak, to help me to send a message to this new generation or whoever is thinking about transition, that they don't have to be afraid. They don't have to fear to express who they are, and who they want to be, and how they want to live the last days. You know, as a trans woman who we only have the statistic of living into 35, and then you pass the 35, win, you won the lottery. You are one of the winners. You know, I'm in my early 30s, and you don't know how I feel every day that I'm getting close to 35, and I don't know I'm gonna be one of those winners. And I don't want the new generation to think that they're alone. No, I want them to know that we are here for them. There is people like Yasmeen, like Kodak, like you all folks here, that we support you, that we are with you, that we actually understand you. And you need to feel safe, that you can do whatever you want to, as long as you have that passion for it. You know, just be brave, love yourself, and do everything with passion, determination. You will make it. You will make it. So you don't have to fear to be who you are. There is nothing wrong. You didn't born in the wrong body. You just happened to born in the wrong society. So you are okay. Just be happy. Set yourself free the best way you can. So Jasmine, I don't know if you want to help me sending in a message to these new people. I really want
I think you're doing a great job.
but I wanna, you know,
Let's hear from all of you guys.
Yes.
Well, just to build on it, that be helpful. There's hope. It's hard. There will be challenges. There will be struggles. There will be barriers. But all in between it, there's really, really joyful moments of transition, of becoming who you are. And regardless of what age you are and you're thinking about transitioning, do it. Don't let that be a barrier or something that's keeping you back. If you want to transition, you can be 15 to 55 or 5 to 100. You take it that
Live your authentic life.
Live your life and live it with dignity and respect, and reach out to folks. No one does it alone. I didn't do it alone. Viviana didn't do it alone. We all had some support somewhere, somehow, something that was bigger than us, and I would reach out to someone and have that support. So
Let's hear from Boyd and then close.
Yes, most definitely. There's a lot more support systems out there today than there ever were. And if you don't want to go to something official, join the Toronto Trans Alliance. We have 2,500 members now. That's huge, and the majority of them are trans. We do allow allies with certain conditions, but I can tell you the number of people that write to, you're allowed to, it's a group, you can talk amongst each other, that write in, that they're just starting and they have questions, and they get so much support from other members. It's a really terrific thing to see. And it's, it's all online, it's all unofficial, and I'm trying to find the word for it. You don't have to disclose yourself, so it's all confidential. So yeah, so reach out, definitely reach out.
It's what an incredibly powerful message to end this episode on that note.
Thank you, guys.
I'm getting emotional because I can't imagine living in the fear. Coming out as a gay man was already a struggle, but imagine being part of the LGBTQ community on top of being trans and wanting to transition, and the fear. It's a layer that I don't think I will ever be able to fathom or fully understand. But it's so powerful to end this episode like that. And that being said, we're going to go on a short break, absorb what we just said, and we'll be right back. So keep watching.
I'm scheduling my post-quarantine hookup itinerary.
I'm exploring every nook and cranny of self-love.
I'm engaging with online fetish communities I never even knew existed.
I am flattening that curve, honey. Ugh, tighter. Oh, tighter. Ugh.
Tyler!
I just found out I've got HIV. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'm scared.
Hey, I know you're scared. I've been living with HIV for 25 years, and with treatment today, I'm living a long, healthy life. You can too.
Maybe I will be okay.
Guests, thank you again for being with us today. Trans awareness and education is so important. I have found my voice as a non-binary person because of my trans family, and I hope people at home or wherever you are watching that this conversation has brought some light and understanding. Co-hosts, you are always amazing, and I'm always so proud to be part of this queer bunch that we are. Now, co-host, is there anything that you wanted to add before we close up? Comments or anything?
Wonderful conversation. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the message of the last segment. That was very powerful to hear your message, all of you. That's all what I have to say.
Thanks, Antoine.
Thank you, everyone.
guests, I know there's so much more that we can talk about and that we could cover today, but is there anything else that you'd like to add or share with us that you think is important or relevant to the conversation that we just had that we might have missed?
I just think that in the upcoming weeks, November 20th is going to be Trans Day of Remembrance.
Thank you.
We should all, and the week of trans visibility. So really be, offer your support. This of all time now, we need much more support because of the context and how things are. And also, I just wanted to remember Coco Ritchie, a trans woman of color who died a few days ago to systemic violence. So may she rest in power.
Thank you, Yasmeen. Boyd, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, basically just to reiterate that yes, it is a very emotional month for us, being November and Trans Day of Remembrance, and absolutely, it's think about what we go through, and as I said, if you have any questions or concerns, reach out to a trans person. And most trans people will be happy to talk to you and give you whatever you need.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Viewers, you can watch this episode online on our Facebook page or on our YouTube pages. Details can be found in the description. Until then, keep safe, stay diligent, and most importantly, keep being resilient. So love from our queer family to yours. Goodbye.
Yay!